Yeah, that's my kind of music. I build violins hoping that they will be used by musicians of this particular kind. My time is mainly taken up with repair work in here, that being the main source of income. It'd be a rare individual that could make a living making new violins. Although I get a pretty good price for my new violins, still I couldn't make a living at it. The fact that I do sell an instrument has very little to do with the pay that I get for it. Let's say that in the case of an instrument that sells for $1,500, for instance, the man on the street would say, well, you built it and you sold it for $1,500 and now you're happy. This isn't necessarily true. I recall that I have sold instruments for the price to students whose people had the money to buy the instrument, and the student couldn't play very well. He really didn't know a good instrument from a bad one. And so he'd take the instrument out and he'd play it. And I know that there's never going to be a time when that it will ever be played well in his hands. So really all I got for the instrument was the price of the instrument itself. They paid what I asked for it. But in the case of instrument being sold to a fine musician that's going to play it on concert stage and play it well for many, many years, then this is the additional pay that I particularly like. And under those circumstances, I feel that I am very, very well paid, because I didn't start out in the first place to make the money. What I started out to do was to make a fine violin that it might be played by a fine musician and be appreciated by people who had the capacity to understand and appreciate the music that was to be made. Take one of my new violins as an example. And we give it to a fine concert violinist and let him play it, or a good symphony player, and let him play the instrument for 6 months hard. And it comes back to me. I can tell that it has been played well in the hands of someone, that it has been played a great deal. Now, this is how a violin improves, a violin that is good when it's new. Now, I can hand this same violin to a student just beginning and let him play the violin for 6 months, and it'll come back no better than it was, and the fact is, it seems to be a little bit confused for having been played out of tune most of the time. Then a good violinist would need to take this pedal and take him 6 months to play the poor thing back to where it knew what it was doing. I have hanging up here in my files records of every violin, certainly, from maybe the 5th or the 6th violin that I made, detailed descriptions of these instruments, each one of them, a record kept of that particular instrument that I can go back to any time that I wish. The reason I keep these records is that from time to time an instrument will pop out that has unusual qualities, a little different than others, and I sometimes wonder then, why is this? And I can go back to the records and study them very carefully and maybe come up with some sort of an answer why this particular instrument or another is different than the others. And if so, then what did I do that might have caused this difference? If you notice hanging around here the templates that I use, and each of the templates is marked that they belong to a certain mold or form from around which these violins are built.
Then they start going again. I like Italian way, madam, anyway. What I'm afraid of, this tension, you see, is going to, it'll pull, just sure to help it in.
It'll pull this off, yes.
Yes, it will.
Yeah, my friend Bill, who comes over once in a while, he's a breed of the old musician that we see no more, or very few of them. He played guitar and radio back during the early, probably in the 20s and the 30s. And he, like most musicians, once they have played an instrument for any length of time, they're an addict to it. And now that he has isn't in health is not too good any longer, he finds the guitar playing to be very important to him because he has time on his hands which he needs to occupy. And he plays still rather well, at least he enjoys it thoroughly. And I enjoy talking to Bill and some of the other fellows of his age and experience. He knows lots of the old musicians who used to play in the big bands, and Bill as well played guitar with some of the big dance bands that we used to hear about. And those fellows, it's a great shame that we don't hear much of them, or we don't have their counterparts anymore, because these men usually were pretty thoroughly educated musicians, unlike some of our modern musicians who play a few chords and pay lip service to music. These men put in lots of time and worked hard at being a musician. And to play in those big bands back then, you had to be a good musician in order to hold down a seat, because there were plenty of other men that would be glad to take the job who could hold down the seat. So it does me good to do work for people like Mr. Ashley, because his guitar means so much to him in the days when he needs something to occupy his time. I often look back and remember the days when I was a child, a young lad growing up. This is a sure sign of old age, so they tell me. With a great deal of pleasure, I look at this. I was fortunate in growing up in a small town of Ewing, Illinois, a little village, a small town of 500 people, which had a college there. In the center of the town was the very core of the town, everything revolving around the college and the campus. A very beautiful setting for a lad. And on the outskirts of the town were small farms and the usual virgin timber forests that we had growing up in the area. A great many woods round and about, and a nice little stream flowing through the fields and through the woods. A place where a boy could run and hunt and eat blackberries. And all the many things that young boys do. And my early life was as free as an Indian. Hardly anyone to say me nay. I went and I came back when I pleased, and many times slept in the woods at night, of course, with the consent of my grandmother who reared me. I sat under the trees and with a sharp pocket knife learned to carve very young, on my fingers mainly, at first. And then eventually learning to build things, to carve things, and this went on much to the horror of the janitors in grade school and high school, who seemed to have some sort of objection to sweeping up shavings. They could always tell where I had been that day by the shavings I left. And grew up there in this way, and learned to play the violin in a haphazard, self-taught way with a couple of friends who beat on the guitar and plucked a banjo. And we played for all sorts of affairs and had a very fine boyhood indeed. Well, after I had finished school at my little hometown of Ewing, eventually was enrolled at the Art Institute, or Institute of Fine Arts in Flint, Michigan. So I decided that I would go out and see what I could do as a commercial sculptor in the middle of the Depression. About 1936 was the year. I came here to Johnston City in 1938. I came here to this town. Had been out of art school only a very short time, making an attempt to work as a commercial sculptor, and half starving to death. It was pretty evident that if you couldn't eat it or wear it, you couldn't sell it during the middle of the Depression. However, I did manage to build a war memorial for World War I when I was 26 years old, quite a large piece. Then sometime after this, I built another piece of sculpture here in Johnston City, which I'm very proud to say has, has been in this little park since 1947 and has become a focal place for the Memorial Day services. But in the violin, building the violin, the most important thing is building a soul into this instrument, something that is entirely different than you would hear in an ordinary factory fiddle, something very human in its voice and qualities. And this is what the serious violin maker is pursuing. Not just to build something that looks like a pretty violin, but to build an instrument that has a substance beyond that of cabinet making, a sound that is rare and beautiful to hear. I have many people ask me, well, how long does it take to make a violin? It's one of the most common questions that comes up. I tell them, well, it'd be hard to say, perhaps 8 weeks if I worked at it 8 hours a day or something like this. But of course we don't, so it takes a great deal longer, really, from beginning to end. This is the sort of wood here, something like this, that I start with when I build a violin. This wood is very carefully chosen for its acoustic properties and is quite old. So once I have finished a violin in this wood, it won't be cracking from season cracking. And it has acoustic properties. Listen to this, which is something you don't expect out of wood. A piece of wood like this, I think I gave $12 for this piece. It's a very fine piece of wood. And the back pieces, such as this one, believe it or not, the piece that this violin would here looked exactly like this when I started it. It was sawed down through here like this all the way through, and the two butt edges are then glued together, such as this, you can see, where it has been glued here. Now the next, this piece of wood incidentally cost $80, which is unbelievable to a lot of people. Then we have here another piece of wood which has been shaped a little bit. Here you see, the arching has started. Now the violin tops and backs are not bent, as a great many folks seem to think that they are, but they are actually carved out with tools, gouges, and little planes like this. Little tiny planes that are made, these are regular violin planes, violin maker's planes, that are made for this sort of work. Very slow, and of course this is never used until you get right down to the final finishing. Then the inside of the wood is brought out with large gouges until we're down to where we're going, and it is very carefully thicknessed and very carefully listened to, like this, as it goes, until we bring it to the proper pitch in the finished violin, as related to the pitch of the back of the violin, this being the belly. There's a great deal to be said about the steel and the tools that we use. Finally, we get to the place where we have to make our own tools. At least this is what I have done, with the help of some of my friends who were professionals in the steel business, making fine steels. We have made up a great many tools. Practically all the tools that I use are handmade. There's a certain relationship between a craftsman and a fine knife. It would be hard to explain to the person who has never used carving tools and has never made things with hand tools. Always an awareness of the dependability of a fine blade, one that I might use consistently for instance, in carving the scroll of a violin. It'll take me 2 to 2.5 days to carve a scroll. During this time, the knives that I use, I will sharpen them not at all during the 2 days or 2.5 days. I occasionally will put them on a piece of leather and polish them off a bit on the edges, but they're still good cutting tools without need of a hone. Now, the average tool that you would pick up wouldn't last 30 minutes on a job like this. The person today who uses electric tools and all sorts of such equipment in his shop, he doesn't have the personal interest or the feel for the steel in the blades that does his cutting. And most of the time he doesn't sharpen them himself, He pays very little attention to them, as a matter of fact, and certainly they're not a close friend of his, such as would be a knife that I use or other people who do handwork, entirely handwork and nothing else, with the tools that they use. This is something of a pity. It's a little bit similar to the man who gets in an airplane and flies cross country without seeing the earth that's under him. So it is with fine tools that are used by hand, that we get a feel for the materials that we're using that couldn't possibly be gotten by a man who's using electrical instruments of some sort. Once in a while I'll have one come in who not familiar with this thing, and not knowing, they thoughtlessly reach over on the workbench and pick up a knife used for a screwdriver or something of this sort, and needless to say, I flogged them. You know, I sometimes wonder if maybe I shouldn't clean this place up and have it painted. Now I have become so accustomed to working in the place, in this mess, that I think I'd find it a little bit difficult to work in the place if it were a little bit cleaner, and people would be disappointed because even the newspaper people make all sorts of snide remarks about the place, the windows needing washing, and that one fella even said that the place had been here for 34 years, and by the appearance of it, that it had never had the windows washed nor the floor swept since. This is some exaggeration. It isn't that bad. I have an old friend of mine, one of my town buddies here, who doesn't do much of anything, and I pay him every week to come in here and sweep the place out, and he manages to knock a little path out through the middle, and it's not nearly as bad as these newspaper people say it is. However, he never has washed the windows. If he's ever dusted, I've never caught him at it. Professor John Wharton was probably the first violinist, real fine violinist, that began to notice that these violins which I make were better than average. And he incidentally owns one of my new violins, which is now being played by his daughter Jean. And she, within her own rights, is a very fine little violinist. I'm very proud of the fact that not too long ago she, with a small group of musicians, played a concert in Carnegie Hall, and at which time she used the violin which belonged to her father, one of mine. Well, I started this business of being interested in the violin at a very early age. probably 11 or 12, and even at that time was beginning to take old violins apart and try to improve them. Of course, this goes on year after year, and learning a little and learning not much through the years that I did put in studying sculpture. But I recall that in the early stages of trying to learn something about the business of not repairing violins necessarily, but of learning to make fine new violins, and it's such a complicated thing that I read all the books that I could get. Then went here and there to violin makers, trying to talk to them to learn something about some of the things that are required in order to make a fine instrument. Coming home completely disappointed and sometimes pretty annoyed with human beings in general, because I gathered that most of them were not telling me even what they knew, and later I discovered that most of them didn't know anything to tell me. But this provoked me to such an extent that I promised myself that if I ever learned anything about the making of violins to the point where it might be of, my knowledge might be of value to some young fellow who was clamoring around trying to discover something about the making of new violins, not necessarily how to make money, but how to build fine instruments, that I would never would I lock the doors on the man, nor never would I refuse to give him information that would be of some use to him. And I've bent the ears of many a young man coming to this place who went away knowing a great deal more than he did when he came in. I think if it were not for the fact that I could build new violins, that the repairing of instruments would become a great bore to me. But the repair work, of course, is the main source of revenue in this shop, as it is in most violin shops. It'd be pretty hard to make a living selling new violins, no matter how fine they are or how much we get for them. There's a limit as to how much can be gotten for a new violin, unfortunately. I sometimes think that it would be nice if I didn't do any of the repairing at all and put my full time to building new violins. And as much I'm not getting any younger, and to face the facts that we have only a matter of a few years left for building new violins, that I sometimes get a little desperate, and I think I should get at it. I should waste no time repairing instruments that are of no particular value. I should put the time into building new violins, but of course we do again get back to the matter of the money that we all need to make in our business. And then again, I'm not so absolutely certain that the violins that I'm building are of this great value to posterity. I like to think that they are. A great many people today think that they are. But I think maybe I'm less certain than any of them about this matter. We have jam sessions out here where the fellows will get together and we have a little music occasionally in the evening, entertain ourselves. Old friends of mine that I've known for a number of years. And we'll make a big pot of coffee and sit around and just play whatever we see fit to play, mostly old standards that was the music that we heard and played when we were growing up. And we all enjoy it thoroughly. It gives us something to do, and one night of the week we play each Friday night and have a great deal of enjoyment doing it. We play only for our own amusement. We make no bones about it. We have no intentions of entertaining anyone. We're under no illusions about the fine music that we make. We just, as an old friend of mine used to say, we just play for our own amusement. And he said amazement. So this is the way we play, for our own amazement. Barney limbers up his arthritis, and Hal comes over and we have coffee. And he has a Coke, he doesn't drink coffee.
And occasionally, we talk about some mutual acquaintances or who were in some of the bands that we used to play in and so forth, and Hal knows quite a few people that I know, and we never did play in the same band. In fact, I never met Hal until about a year ago. But I've known Jack, well, I guess for 30 years, haven't I?
Yeah, just about. You know, the odd part of it is, I can't read a doggone note. And they've got me playing lead fiddle. These guys are playing the accompaniment off the music. And if I make one little mistake, why, they look at me like I have worse than a worm, you know. I've remembered about 500 songs, and still they're not satisfied because I forget the ending on one of them. I'm probably the only first fiddler in the land, can't read a lick. We have a great deal of fun playing, going back and playing some of the music that we played back in our heyday, during the time that we were all younger than we are now. When I think of this way of working, it's so contrary to many of the mercenary people who build whatever they build with only one thing in mind: the money that they're to be paid for. And I think of a thing that was, I think Socrates was the man who made this statement. He said, a man worth anything should never be concerned with living or dying, but only concerned with whether what he is doing is right or wrong. And there could be, I think, no better example of this than in the work of a craftsman or an artist. And so far as a vacation is concerned, I am more comfortable here in the shop than I am anywhere else in the world. Besides this, every day in the shop is a vacation, so far as I am concerned. So I've become so accustomed to working here that to leave it bothers me more than to stay.